COVID-19.
Coronavirus pandemics.
COVID-19 stuff.
Coronavirus.
COVID-19.
COVID-19's
Coronavirus.
COVID-19 was a prominent moment in all of our lives, and although the month-long vacations from work and school may have been relaxing and enjoyable to some, it's important to recognize that it was an extremely tough time for others. And while I was alright at home spending time with my family, I realized a lot of my friends weren't having the same experience as me, knowing that they were grieving the losses of family members and other loved ones. And it made me sad to think that because of the lockdown, they weren't able to properly reach out to support to learn about their emotions, but instead have to deal with it all alone. So, what could I do? Knowing that most of these teens were turning to the internet and video games for escapism, I knew that with the pandemic, the best way to help them was through that same digital format they were all turning to. That's why, for my capstone Grief and Games, my goal has been to create a video game based entirely around the themes of grief in order to provide relatability and solace to players, whilst also teaching them the proper coping mechanisms to deal with loss, or help their friends who may be suffering from bereavement. However, in this moment, you might be thinking, that's great, but how in the world do video games relate to grief? Trust me, when brainstorming my capstone idea, I thought of this exact same question. So, I began my research. As it turns out, according to Caitlin Hitchcock, a clinical psychologist and researcher at the University of Melbourne, video games are actually extremely helpful in helping teenagers through the grieving process. And this is because video games have the power to normalize grief and offer comfort, similar to how all forms of art do. The characters' challenges that they overcome and the lessons they learn along the way can help us find meaning in our own trauma so that we ourselves can overcome it. So after being able to successfully confirm my capstone idea would have a meaningful impact on others, I began intensive research on the stages of grief and how bereavement interacts with different people. However, in order to ensure I was providing the most accurate representation of grief possible, I knew articles online just weren't gonna cut it. This is when I met my first mentor. Dana Wiseman is a certified therapist in Maryland, which is one of the top 5 states in psychiatric studies. We chatted a bit over the phone in order to help me gain a better understanding of what I needed to implement into the game in order to make it the most believable. Now knowing what I needed to do, it was time for me to start my game. I knew coding an entire video game in a year would be impossible to achieve, so instead, I chose to create an opening scene of the game to teach the player the mechanics and get a taste of what the full game might look and feel like in the future. This way, I can release this version of the game as a playable demo teaser in order to grow a community and get excited for the full release. To do this, my first step was to create the maps or locations in which the game takes place. So, I started by designing the layouts on Procreate so I wasn't going in blind. Then, pixel by pixel, added my vision into the game so that there was a playable environment. Next, I had to design the characters. So again, pixel by pixel, I created the character sprites and NPCs, or non-playable characters, so that the game was playable for viewers. With these designs in mind, it was important for a game about grief to be able to show the emotions the characters feel. So after several cases of trial and error, we finally settled on a final design of character sprites that appear next to the text. Thus, these text icons were created. These images are shown when a character is speaking so that the viewer can better understand the character's tone. And of course, my favorite part of this whole process was the music. I wanted all of the songs in my game to be custom made, but I wasn't exactly very skilled in music production. Therefore, I needed some help. I attempted to reach out to several small artists, and although I didn't get many responses back, I did get a few. This is when I got in touch with Zach Berlsheimer, an alumni from the class of 23 who enjoys making video game soundtracks for fun in his free time. We chatted back and forth constantly to help me produce music to implement into the game exactly how I imagined it should be. In fact, the music you're listening to right now is a part of my soundtrack. I learned that music is extremely important when it comes to expressing emotion and helping people feel what the music is intended for. For example, in this scene, which song do you think sounds more appropriate? Exactly! I chose the second one as well. Of course, the final and most tedious part of this whole process was to piece it all together through code so that the game could actually function. Finishing this, I held a beta testing session that I monitored in the student union to collect feedback and adjust the game accordingly. And with over 10,000 lines of code later, this is the trailer for the game that I've created, which is now available to play through this link on my capstone page. However, I think it's important to recognize that this process was far from easy. I came across several glitches within the game, specifically from errors in my code. Although some of these glitches were easy fixes, others took hours to solve. However, using all the dedication I had for completing this passion project of mine, no glitch that was found in the game went unsolved. Unfortunately, this wasn't the only hurdle I had to overcome. I found that although exporting the finished game onto my own laptop was easy, finding a way for others to download it without the game breaking came difficult because of the different files the game included. To overcome this, over spring break, my brother and I sat down to compress these files into one single downloadable zip file that's accessible on both Mac and Windows. Included in the download is an instruction sheet that explains how to access the download and solve issues with opening the game, primarily directed towards Mac users because of Apple's built-in security with unknown files. So what did I learn during my capstone project? Not only did I learn how to communicate with others better and collaborate with people in different fields of expertise, but I learned more about my own abilities and how to improve upon them. For instance, all of the code in the game was all code that I taught myself through online forums, YouTube videos, and questions I asked my brother, who's a computer science major. I've never taken a coding class in my life, and through my capstone project, I was able to quickly build upon a skill I had limited knowledge on. However, all in all, I think this capstone project really taught me how to overcome adversity and tackle my problems head-on, but still reach out to people when I need help. After all, that's what my projects aim to do is from the beginning, right? That's my capstone Grief and Games. Thank you so much for listening and supporting my project.